All right, so today we're diving into some seriously deep stuff with David Hume and his ideas about morality. It's like we all know that things like kindness and justice are important, right? But like, have you ever stopped to think about why?
Yeah, and that's what makes Hume so fascinating. He wasn't content just telling us what to think about morality. He wanted to, dissect it,
Yeah.
figure out how we actually make those judgments about good and bad.
Totally. It's not just a list of do's and don'ts with him. He goes way deeper, trying to understand why we praise some things and condemn others.
And for him, it all starts with this battle between, well, I guess you could call it reason versus sentiment. Like, is it logic that determines right and wrong, or is it all about feelings and gut reactions?
It's kind of like imagine a courtroom, right? You've got lawyers, evidence, all these logical arguments flying around. But then when it comes to the jury's decision, it often feels like there's something more than just the facts at play. This gut feeling about whether something feels right or wrong, you know?
Absolutely. And that's what makes Hume's take so radical. He's like, nope, it's not one or the other. He says both reason and sentiment are essential for how we form our moral judgments. It's this intricate dance between the two.
So, not picking sides, but understanding how logic and feelings actually work together. But how does that even work? How do these two very different things, shape our moral compass?
Okay, so picture this. You see someone do something incredibly generous, right?
Yeah.
Like going above and beyond for a total stranger. You probably feel this immediate surge of admiration, right? That's sentiment in action.
Yeah, totally.
But then you might start thinking about the bigger picture, like how that act of generosity impacts the community, maybe even inspires others to be more generous. And that's your reason kicking in, analyzing the consequences, making sure those initial feelings line up with, well, logic.
So it's like our gut gives us a direction, and then reason steps in to map out the route, make sure it actually leads somewhere worthwhile.
Exactly. They work in tandem, shaping our moral perspective. And Hume applies this same thinking to some of the biggest virtues out there, like benevolence. It's easy to say, oh, kindness and generosity feel good, but Hume pushes us to dig deeper.
It's true, though. Those qualities do feel inherently good. I mean, even way back in ancient Greece, the statesman Pericles wanted to be remembered for his kindness, not just his accomplishments. Shows how much we value these things, don't you think?
Absolutely. But here's where Hume adds another layer. He connects those warm, fuzzy feelings about kindness to their actual effects on society. He'd say part of why we praise benevolence is because it's essential for a flourishing society, plain and simple.
It's like kindness has this ripple effect, right? Benefits you as a person, but it's the impact on the community that gives it real power, like a foundation for a better, more harmonious society.
Precisely. And it's interesting how our understanding of this evolves. Take charity, for example. Giving to beggars was once seen as, a moral no-brainer. But now we recognize that it's not always the most effective way to address poverty.
That's so true. It's not that the intention is wrong, but we've learned that sometimes those actions don't create the positive social change we'd hoped for.
Exactly. It's a constant process of figuring out how to turn good intentions into actions that truly make a difference for the better. Which brings us to another big one Hume grappled with. Justice.
Right, justice. We love this idea of a world without it, like some mythical utopia where everything's peace and harmony. But then there's that whole survival of the fittest thing, which, let's be real, is pretty harsh.
Exactly. And Hume's point is, we didn't create systems of justice because we're inherently bad or selfish. We created them because we need them.
It's like driving without traffic laws, right? Total chaos.
Precisely. Justice, even in its most complex forms, is kind of like those traffic laws for society, creating the structure for us to coexist peacefully and productively. And in the long run, that benefits everyone.
Okay, so justice is like the ultimate traffic cop for society, keeping things running smoothly. But if we're saying morality boils down to what's useful, doesn't that feel kind of cynical? Are we praising justice because it's good for everyone or just because it benefits us in the end? I mean, is true altruism even a thing in Hume's world?
Tough questions, right? And Hume tackles them head on. He doesn't deny self-interest, but he says it's too simple to explain all our moral judgments.
Right, like how do you explain those selfless acts we see, the big and small ones? Where's the personal gain in that?
Think about historical figures we admire, people we've never met, whose actions had zero impact on our lives. Yet we still celebrate their virtues.
Yeah, it's like their selflessness echoes through time, even when there's nothing in it for us personally.
Exactly. And that suggests something deeper is going on. Hume calls it our moral sense, this innate ability to recognize and appreciate qualities that benefit the group, even when they might seem to go against our own self-interest.
So it's not like we're consciously calculating what's in it for me every time we make a moral choice. More like we're wired to understand that what's good for the group often ends up being good for us too, right?
Right. It's this understanding that a just and benevolent society is ultimately one where we, as individuals, are more likely to flourish. And it's not just about those big, obvious virtues either. Hume says even seemingly smaller things like wit, intelligence, or even just being pleasant to be around those have moral weight too.
Wait, so being a good conversationalist is morally good? That seems like a stretch.
Think of it this way. Hume believed these qualities, while maybe not moral in the traditional sense, still add to a person's overall value to society. They make interactions more enjoyable, help build connections, create a more harmonious environment.
So those qualities make someone easier to work with, more likely to contribute to positive social interactions. Even humor can be useful in that sense.
Exactly. Imagine you overhear someone being described as intelligent, kind, and funny. Don't you kind of want to meet them? It suggests someone who brings a lot to the table, someone who enriches the lives of those around them.
Totally. Those qualities are like a signal that this is someone who gets it, who values connection and a positive atmosphere.
Right, and this brings us back to Hume's idea of usefulness. It's not just about grand gestures. Even those small, everyday qualities have a ripple effect, contributing to a happier, more harmonious society. But what's really interesting is how Hume links this to the idea of evolving moral judgments.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
How does usefulness play into the fact that what we consider moral seems to change over time?
Well, if we accept that what's considered useful changes depending on the time and place.
Well, if what's considered useful changes depending on the time and place, then it kind of makes sense that our ideas about morality would shift too. Like those historical figures we talked about, heroes in their own time, but now some of their actions seem, well, not so heroic.
Exactly. If useful is always changing, then morality can't be this fixed set of rules, right? It has to adapt and evolve along with society. It's not about judging the past by our standards. It's about understanding the context, what worked for them then.
So less about judging, more about understanding, figuring out the useful qualities that mattered back then and how they helped their society function.
Exactly. It's all about historical perspective, something Hume was big on. He'd want us to be humble in our moral judgments, recognizing that our perspective is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. There's always more to learn, different angles to consider.
He really keeps us on our toes, doesn't he? Never any easy answers with Hume, just more doors to open in our minds.
That's what makes him so compelling. He gives us a framework for how we make these judgments, but he also leaves room for us to think for ourselves, to keep the conversation going.
And on that note, I think we've given everyone plenty to think about today. Time to wrap up our deep dive into the mind of David Hume and his take on morality. But like we said, there's always more to uncover.
Absolutely. Hume's work is full of these amazing insights. Definitely worth exploring more on your own. There's a reason his ideas still resonate with people after all this time.
Couldn't agree more. Until next time, everyone, keep those brains buzzing.